Welcome to the 2020-2022 Grow Your Own video series. If you haven't already, please watch the GYO General Overview video first to get a better understanding of the full grant program. Then watch the Pathway 1 Overview video. In this video, we will take a dive into Pathway 2 and talk about its purpose, funding, eligibility, and timeline. We will also provide considerations for the application process. Before continuing, be reminded that Pathway 2 can only be offered as an add-on to Pathway 1 and not as a standalone program. You must design a Pathway 1 program in order to design a Pathway 2 program. Pathway 2 offers stipends to transition paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers into full-time teaching roles in their LEA. The ultimate outcome of this pathway is to increase staff employed in the district who work towards the role of the classroom teacher. For this pathway, candidates that may receive stipends are paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers. Additional and more specific criteria of who is eligible to participate is listed on page 10 of the RFA program guidelines. Remember, candidates cannot be new employees to the LEA in 2020-2021, and also cannot be staff that already received grant funds in Cycle 1 or Cycle 2. Pathway 2 offers two types of award amounts. Applicants may request up to $5,500 per candidate pursuing a teacher certification only in a high-need area, such as one identified in your needs assessment. $5,000 of this should be used towards gaining a teacher certification. The remaining $500 can be used for administrative and/or indirect costs. Applicants may also request up to $13,000 per candidate who will complete a bachelor's degree and teacher certification. $12,000 of this should be used towards the obtainment of the degree and certification. The remaining funds of $1,000 can be used for administrative and/or indirect costs. In order to participate, these candidates must already have at least 75 college credit hours complete by May 15, 2020. The maximum number of participants for any application is 10 per LEA. Therefore, if an applicant is adding Pathway 2 to their Pathway 1 application, the maximum is still 10 as the combined total between Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. That means the maximum for Pathway 2 can be no higher than 9 candidates. All applicant eligibility rules for Pathway 1 also apply to Pathway 2. These are covered in the Pathway 1 Overview webinar. Every LEA that elects to apply for Pathway 2 must also be participating in Pathway 1, even LEAs within shared services agreements. Finally, each applicant that has candidates pursuing a certification only, we'll call these Pathway 2B candidates, should be obtaining their certification through the same partner EPP as a cohort. The applicant is responsible for setting up an MOU between the LEA and this one EPP. Hey, I made a pretty big mistake. Can we start over?
Yeah, that's okay. Just give me 1 second. Go.
Welcome to the 2020-2022 Grow Your Own video series. If you haven't already, please watch the GYO General Overview video first to get a better understanding of the full grant program. Then watch the Pathway 1 Overview video. This is the Pathway 2 Overview video, transition of paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitutes to full-time teaching roles. In this video, we will take a dive into Pathway 2 and talk about its purpose, funding, eligibility, and timelines. We will also provide considerations for the application process. Before continuing, be reminded that Pathway 2 can only be offered as an add-on to Pathway 1 and not as a standalone program. You must design a Pathway 1 program in order to design a Pathway 2 program. Pathway 2 offers stipends to transition paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers to teaching roles in the LEA. The ultimate outcome of this pathway is to increase staff employed in the district who work towards the role as a classroom teacher. For this pathway, candidates that may receive stipends are paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers who spend the majority of their time supporting instructional activities. Additional and more specific criteria of who is eligible to participate is listed on page 10 of the RFA program guidelines. Remember, candidates cannot be new employees to the LEA in 2020-2021, and also cannot be staff that already received grant funds in Cycle 1 or Cycle 2. Pathway 2 offers two types of award amounts. Applicants may request up to $5,500 per candidate pursuing only a teaching certification in a high-needs area, such as one identified in your needs assessment. $5,000 of this should be used toward gaining a teacher certification. The remaining $500 can be used for administrative and/or indirect costs. Applicants may also request up to $13,000 per candidate who will complete a bachelor's degree and certification program. $12,000 of this should be used towards the payment of the degree and certification. The remaining funds of $1,000 can be used for administrative and/or indirect costs. In order to participate, these candidates must already have at least 75 college credit hours complete by May 15, 2020. The maximum number of participants for any application is 10 participants per LEA. Therefore, if an applicant is adding Pathway 2 to their Pathway 1 application, the maximum is still 10 as a combined total between Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. That means the maximum for Pathway 2 can be no higher than 9 candidates. All applicant eligibility rules for Pathway 1 also apply to Pathway 2. These are covered in the Pathway 1 overview webinar. Every LEA that elects to apply for Pathway 2 must also be participating in Pathway 1, even LEAs within shared services agreements. Finally, each applicant that has candidates pursuing certification only, we call these Pathway 2A candidates, should be obtaining their certification through the same partner EPP as a cohort. The applicant is responsible for setting an MOU up between the LEA and this one EPP. Let's take a look at an example funding request for Pathway 2. Because Pathway 2 is an add-on to Pathway 1, we'll use the scenario from the Pathway 1 video. This same LEA is requesting funding for 6 paraprofessionals to become full-time teachers. 4 of them only need to get their teaching certification, and 2 of them need to obtain a bachelor's degree and teaching certification. For Pathway 2, there are 2 categories that need to be counted and calculated. Number of candidates pursuing a teaching certification only, in this example, 4, and number of candidates pursuing both a bachelor's degree and a teaching certification, in this example, 2. Based on this scenario, this applicant would request $48,000 for Pathway 2. You might recall that the requested funds from Pathway 1 totaled $123,000. Adding the total request of Pathway 1 and Pathway 2, this LEA would now request $171,000. If you are applying as the fiscal agent of an SSA, you would do this for each LEA and sum all of the totals to get the total request for Pathway 1 and 2. Please note that each participating LEA that elects to pursue Pathway 2 must also participate in Pathway 1. This means that an SSA may not include any LEAs that are only participating in Pathway 2. Remember, additional requests for administrative or indirect costs on top of what is already built into this formula is also not allowed. You might also notice that this funding example includes more than 10 candidates. There are 10 teachers who will be teaching education and training courses, and 8 paraprofessional staff who will be obtaining a certification and/or degree. That means that this funding example represents a shared services agreement that has more than one LEA. For more examples of Pathway 1 and 2 funding scenarios, please refer to pages 6 through 9 of the RFA program guidelines. In 2019-2020, LEAs should establish a partnership with a single high-quality educator preparation program for candidate certification and support, and formalize this with a memorandum of understanding. This MOU will be submitted to TEA after award selection. Let's review the timeline for Pathway 2A first. This applies to candidates that already have a bachelor's degree and will be earning a teaching certification using their $5,000 allocation. These candidates should enroll in the partner EPP designated by the LEA in the 2019-2020 or 2020-2021 school year. Within the first year of the grant, by the end of the 2020-2021 school year, these candidates should complete the EPP program and be awarded a certification. Pathway 2A candidates should be serving as teachers of record within the LEA beginning in fall 2021 for the 2021-2022 school year. Now let's review the timeline for Pathway 2B. This applies to candidates that have at least 75 college credit hours and will be completing a bachelor's degree and earning a certification. In the 2020-2021 school year, these candidates should be continuing their degree coursework within the university of their choosing. Some may graduate with a bachelor's degree in year 1 of the grant. In the second year of the grant, 2021-2022, these candidates should graduate with a bachelor's degree, enroll in or continue and complete an EPP, and be awarded a teacher certification. Pathway 2B candidates should be serving as teachers of record within the LEA beginning in fall 2022 for the 2022-2023 school year. All of these details are also outlined on page 16 of the RFA program guidelines. Because Pathway 2 is an add-on to Pathway 1, for this section, the focus will be on additional considerations for Pathway 2. The general guidance for sections can be found in the Pathway 1 overview webinar. Generally, when completing an application that covers both pathways, be sure that your response to each section of the application addresses both your Pathway 1 program and your Pathway 2 program. If applicants do not provide this information, it may affect scoring. We recommend watching the remainder of this video with the application and attachment available for reference. The first section of the application is the needs assessment. On page 2 of the application, the applicant should identify 3 quantifiable needs as identified in your needs assessment, the program that funds will address, and your plan for addressing each need. Remember to conduct the comprehensive needs assessment around Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 needs. When conducting the comprehensive needs assessment in alignment with the Pathway 2 intended outcomes, some data sources to consider include the number of teacher vacancies and applications per vacancy, the diversity of the LEA campus teaching staff in comparison to the diversity of the LEA campus student population, and other local needs such as bilingual and special education staffing shortages. When you describe the plans to address these needs, include strategies aligned to the Pathway 2 program in addition to the Pathway 1 program. Next, pages 2 and 3 of the application ask the applicant to identify a SMART goal consistent with the purpose of the grant, and 3 benchmarks for progress and implementation of the grant. Applicants should either develop a SMART goal for both Pathways 1 and 2 combined, or develop 2 SMART goals, one for Pathway 1 and one for Pathway 2. When developing benchmarks, include benchmarks for both pathways for each quarter. For example, Quarter 1 benchmark should address the Pathway 1 SMART goal as well as the Pathway 2 SMART goal. And strong benchmarks would align to specific performance measures addressed in pages 24 and 25 of the RFA program guidelines. For instance, a specific performance measure for Pathway 2 would be the number and type of bachelor's degrees and teaching certifications awarded to candidates each grant year. The next section on page 3 asks applicants to address how they will use the required collection of program evaluation data to make adjustments and modify their programs to ensure that they reach their benchmarks and SMART goals. Make sure that this section also addresses both Pathway 2 and Pathway 1. When you respond to the first program requirement, be sure the sustainability plan also addresses Pathway 2. Specifically, a pipeline from support staff to teaching staff. When you respond to the second program requirement, be sure to also include the plan to recruit paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers who will earn a bachelor's degree and/or teaching certification. Additional things to consider: is your plan equitable and based on research? Which staff have strong indicators, including involvement in school activities and high evaluation ratings? How will you generate interest among diverse and high-performing staff? How will your recruitment strategy incorporate considerations of diversity and/or hard-to-staff certification areas? The third program requirement asks for applicants to describe how the LEA will equitably select quality diverse candidates from the pool of eligible candidates who want to become certified teachers. In this section, add to your response from Pathway 1 to include specifics from Pathway 2. Remember your needs assessment. The fourth program requirement asks applicants to describe how the LEA will support the selected candidates that will be receiving stipends to complete their degrees and certification. We recommend that you name specific supports for Pathway 2 candidates to add to your response. For example, what additional professional development can the LEA provide for the teacher candidate? How can paid release time and flexible schedules help candidates stay on track towards certification? Program Requirement 5 asks the applicant to describe the MOU in which the selected candidates commit to remain in the LEA for an agreed upon length of time as a condition of receiving funds, and the LEA commits to hiring and retaining candidates with satisfactory program completion. Again, be sure to answer this question for both Pathway 1 and for Pathway 2 candidates in your application document. Similar to Pathway 1, be sure to include how much you are requesting for Pathway 2 in the correct cost category. And be sure to break down the cost in the budget summary. Remember, the application requests that you enter line items, unlike what you see here. As a reminder, the cost categories are payroll costs, such as the first and second lines of this example, professional and contracted services, supplies and materials, and other operating costs. For a complete list of allowable costs, refer to pages 22 to 24 of the RFA Program Guidelines document. In addition to the grant application, all applicants are also required to complete a Grow Your Own Program attachment for the related pathway or pathways. For Pathway 2, there is an additional section on the attachment following the questions for Pathway 1 that are relevant to Pathway 2. The Pathway 2 section has only one question asking applicants to describe the plan to develop a partnership between one high-quality educator preparation program and the LEA. Things to consider include selecting an educator preparation program that meets the needs of your candidate, or how the LEA intends to ensure a quality training experience for their candidate. Your plan here must include job-embedded training, flexibility of training location and schedule, a cohort approach, and consistent supports that encourage persistence and sustainability. Eligible partner EPPs are only those with accredited, accredited not rated, and accredited WARN designations. The plan should include all Pathway 2A certification-only candidates being certified by a single partner LEA as a cohort. On the 2020-2022 Grow Your Own Grant Opportunities page, we have also provided additional resources for your reference as mentioned previously. The intention of providing these resources is to share additional background information, research, and best practices, which applicants may use to inform the design of their program. As you review the additional webinars in the sequence, and as you design and complete your grant application, please submit any and all questions that arise. We will compile these questions and address them in a frequently asked questions document. The deadline to submit questions is October 11th, 2019. The frequently asked questions document will be posted to the Grow Your Own Grant Opportunities page on October 21st, 2019. We highly encourage you to view all videos for the pathways you are planning to apply, including the Education and Training course video if you are applying for Pathway 1. Thank you, and we look forward to your application.